I transformed my life in 6 months, and this is exactly how I did it. 6 months ago, I was at the end of one of the most difficult periods of my life. Out of shape, eating poorly, prioritising everything but my health, stuck in cycles of distraction and self-sabotage. So I made one decision that changed everything. I booked a flight to Mexico with no plan whatsoever. That single choice led to 2 months travelling around Central America, getting in the best shape of my life, booking my second marathon, booking my first ultra marathon, and restarting my coaching business. Here's how just one decision can change everything, and the 6 lessons that will help you do the same. Lesson 1. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. For years, I'd been telling myself that I was going to travel. But during that difficult period, I created excuse after excuse. I stayed as busy as possible, and I delayed that decision. The truth is, I was keeping myself distracted, and nothing felt better than never being bored. And I never let myself alone with my thoughts long enough to address the core issue that I wasn't taking care of myself. I ignored the signs. I was tired, out of shape, sleeping and eating terribly. I was falling back into old patterns, neglecting the fundamental procedures that kept me on the straight and narrow, holding off for that perfect moment when life would calm down, when I'd somehow magically have my act together. But that moment never came. And in reality, it was never going to. The breakthrough happened when I realised I was drowning in my own excuses. I could either continue waiting for the perfect time to make changes, or I could make an imperfect decision that would force me to change. So I booked a flight to Mexico. No perfect plan, no ideal timing, just action when action was needed. Lesson 2. A deadline can change the game. Once I'd booked that flight, something shifted immediately. I suddenly had 12 weeks to get myself together, and having a deadline changed everything. Previously, I'd been telling myself that I'd get everything sorted soon, letting myself believe that somehow I'd fit training and headspace around my already unsustainable schedule, convincing myself I'd just figure it out eventually. But booking that flight gave me something I'd been missing for a long time: accountability with a hard deadline, a defined period of time in which to achieve a specific, measurable goal. I wasn't going to show up in Mexico out of shape, tired and mentally scattered. I had an objective, a reason, and most importantly, a date on the calendar that wasn't negotiable. The plane was leaving whether I was ready or not. That urgency forced me to stop making excuses and start making decisions. I couldn't put it off anymore because time was running out. I had to get serious about my nutrition, my training, my sleep, my mental state, not because I felt motivated, but because I had no choice. Sometimes we need external pressure to create internal change, and that doesn't necessarily mean that external pressure has to come from someone else. I created that pressure myself. I took control when I knew I needed to. That flight wasn't just booking a holiday. It was like using a defib on my life, the shock I needed to get back into the right rhythm. Lesson 3. Systems beat motivation every time. Having a 12-week deadline was one thing, but I knew it was going to be hard, especially putting myself into a strict calorie deficit. Knowing full well I wouldn't be motivated every day, I began building systems that would make consistency almost inevitable. I set non-negotiables, things I would do regardless of how I felt. Scheduled and locked in gym sessions, calorie limits, cardio. These weren't suggestions, they were requirements. I also had an accountability partner. We kept each other in check when things got hard, and that was vital. I wasn't just getting lean or shredded to show off on holiday. I was rewiring my mind to form better habits. I was putting systems in place for me to do this long term, building a behaviour blueprint I would follow way beyond the 12-week deadline. I was about to embark on 2 months of travel where everything would be unpredictable. So the systems I was creating needed to be so ingrained in me that they would be effortless to execute, especially in unfamiliar territory. As the deadline drew closer, the British Airways email notifications came in thick and fast asking whether I was excited to jet off to the other side of the world. I did what I needed to do. 1. I researched hostels based on their proximity to gyms. 2. Kept my eating very simple. Consistent meals that I could replicate with basic ingredients anywhere in the world. Eggs, chicken, rice, vegetables, canned tuna, sweet corn, and more. Foods I could find anywhere in any supermarket in Central America. This forward thinking helped me reduce the friction to the habits that I wanted to keep even before I left home. And before you jump to conclusions, of course, I ate local food as well, but we'll get to that later. When I finally got to Central America, those systems saved me. On days where I felt exhausted from hiking or exploring new cities, I still showed up to the gym because it was on my list of non-negotiables. James Clear says in Atomic Habits, we don't rise to the level of our goals, we fall to the level of our systems. One decision got me started, but those systems, the systems I put in place for myself, kept me going for 2 months across 5 countries. Lesson 4. Sometimes you need distance to see clearly. For a good long while back home, I'd been surrounded by the same environment, the same routines, and the same triggers that kept me stuck. But while travelling, I was in a completely different world. Away from all the noise and distractions that had been keeping me from my inner dialogue, I could finally think clearly. There's something powerful about removing yourself from the environment where your problems have become part of the landscape. It gives you perspective you just can't get when you're still in the middle of it. I now had all this time to process the difficult periods of my life, time to audit myself and truly ask why I got caught up in these destructive cycles and inertia. As I travelled, it became clearer and clearer that I'd been gifted the space I needed to think with clarity, to appreciate what needed to be appreciated, and to focus on what really mattered in my life. Back home, I was constantly reacting to the endless stream of urgencies that really weren't important. I was so busy just being busy that I never stopped to ask the important questions. Who was I becoming? What was I building? What was I moving towards? Was I moving towards something meaningful or just moving to avoid being still? When I was away, there were no immediate demands on my time. And if there was, I was thousands of miles away. So if something needed my attention, I couldn't have done anything about it anyway. Those important questions finally had space to breathe. I could recognize how certain environments, certain people, and certain routines were either lifting me up, serving me, or pulling me down. That distance gave me something invaluable. Clarity. Clarity about what I actually wanted my life to look like. Not what I thought I should want, not what looked good from the outside, but what actually aligned with who I was becoming. Sometimes you need to step completely outside your normal world to see it clearly. And that doesn't mean you necessarily need to book a flight to Mexico, but you do need to create space between yourself and the environment that's keeping you stuck. Because clarity doesn't come from thinking more, it comes from thinking differently. Lesson 5. Consistency compounds in ways you can't imagine. Here's something that I didn't expect about those 2 months in Central America. It wasn't the big moments that changed me. They were incredible, and I'm so grateful I experienced what I did. Like climbing Acatenango in Guatemala or swimming in cenotes in Mexico. Instead, it was the small, daily decisions that you could easily pass off as being insignificant. Waking up at 4 a.m. to make sure I got in a gym session before a long day of exploring. Choosing eggs and chicken over another plate of nachos. Walking to the supermarket to buy vegetables when I could have just eaten street food for every meal. These weren't heroic acts or special, they were just consistent, intentional choices. Like I said before, I didn't restrict myself. I just stayed mindful when making decisions. Here's some of the incredible food I enjoyed out there. And yes, there were times when I went overboard. Like one day in El Salvador, I ordered 3 regular pupusas and 1 pupusa loca because I was intrigued and I didn't know what it was. But here's what's different. I didn't let one indulgent meal derail everything I had built. I enjoyed every bite. It was delicious. I then laughed about how much food I'd ordered and eaten, woke up the next day, right back into my routine. In the past, one overindulgent meal would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and thrown me completely off track. But I had forged strong enough foundations that I could see these moments as what they really were. Occasional treats that had no real impact on my progress if I actually enjoyed them. Guilt-free, and then got straight back on track. Every single day I chose to stick to my non-negotiables. I was building evidence for myself. Evidence that I am someone who does what they say they'll do. Not for praise, not for adulation or external validation, but for myself and no one else. Traveling alone gave me the permission to prioritize showing up for myself without judgment or distraction. Those daily choices weren't just improving my fitness or my discipline, they were reaffirming my identity. I was healing from wounds that had thrown me off track for so long and kept me unbalanced. Wounds that I needed to take ownership of and suture myself. The habits and the system I had built had become part of who I was, not something that I was trying to do. The compounding effect of my consistency was showing, and it still shows. The more consistent I stayed, the easier it got. And that compound effect went way beyond the physical. The confidence I gained from keeping promises to myself, it started bleeding into everything else. I began believing I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined. That's the real power of consistency. It's not just about the results you can see, it's about becoming the type of person who achieves those results naturally. And once you see that person come into existence, everything, and I mean everything, changes. Lesson 6. Hunt your habits. Don't hope for them, because discipline is the ultimate self-love. By the end of those 2 months, something had fundamentally shifted. I was someone who had proven to themselves that they could show up, consistently, even under the most inconsistent circumstances. I finally understood what was wrong when I was stuck. I'd been hoping for change instead of hunting it down. Here's what I mean. For so long, I'd hoped I'd feel like getting myself together again. I hoped I'd naturally start eating better because I thought I had done the work. I'd been in shape before, and I've worked in fitness for years, so I just got lazy. I became passive. I was waiting and reacting. But hunting is different. Hunting is proactive. It's doing something based on necessity, not how you feel in the moment. And in my case, it was necessary for me to realign with myself. It was my responsibility and mine alone. I went through a difficult and disciplined process of hunting for that fire again, and I found it. Making yourself do hard things and staying disciplined in order to become who you truly want to be is not punishment. It is the deepest form of self-love there is. Every time I chose discipline over convenience, whether that was getting up early, choosing better food, or staying consistent with my training, I wasn't depriving myself. I was investing in the future version of me. Each decision was an act of self-respect, showing love to the person I was becoming. I fell back in love with the process, and I fell back in love with myself. You see, falling in love with the process isn't about falling in love with the gym, loving every workout or making it look easy. It's about falling in love with yourself. It's about loving yourself enough to make decisions that your future self will thank you for. It's about understanding that discipline isn't restriction, it is freedom. Freedom from the chaos of emotional decision making, freedom from the cycle of starting and stopping, and freedom from the all or nothing. Every time you choose the harder path in the short term, you're saying, I love you to the future version of you. Every time you show up when you don't feel like it, you're building trust with yourself. And over time, that trust, that stacked evidence, that portfolio of proof that you are who you say you are, that brings you a confidence that you cannot acquire anywhere else. And that is everything. Habits aren't handed out, they are hunted down. And the hunt isn't about perfection, it's about intention. It's about making the decision to stop hoping things will change and start making them change. Because you deserve to become the person that you are capable of being. And that person is worth hunting for.